Early in my career, I was working at a job I loved, but I realized there was no room for advancement. No matter how well I did, if I stayed with this organization, I would be in the same role and there would never be any opportunity for growth, advancement, or making more money. So I determined it's time for me to leave. But the first interview I had after leaving that organization was the worst interview I have had in my life. And I'm going to share with you today 3 things I learned during the worst interview I've ever had. Let's go. Now, this interview was the worst interview I had in my life for a few reasons. One, I didn't prepare adequately. So I went into there without really being fully prepared, which is ironic considering I run a YouTube channel about being prepared for interviewing and nailing your interview. I was not set up for success to nail my interview. It also was a bad interview because the place where I went ended up feeling like it would be a terrible place to go work. In fact, the hiring manager asked me this question. The question was, if I hire you in 6 months, what am I going to hate about you? Which is just about the worst, most negative interview question I can imagine asking. I would never ask something like that, but that's something that this person asked me. And it leads me to the first thing I learned during the worst interview I've ever had. Make sure you read reviews about what it's like going to the interview. So, for example, what you want to do before you go to an interview is you want to go to Glassdoor and you want to read their Glassdoor reviews. After the interview, I actually went to Glassdoor to see, okay, what was this place actually rated? And they had like 2.8 stars out of 5. That is a terrible rating. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 negative reviews, but it was a ton of negative reviews. But I didn't do my due diligence and actually do my research and look into this organization and find myself thinking, okay, is this worth working at or is this place not worth working at? And the reality is, I had a pretty negative experience. I had a bad interview. It didn't feel good. I had to take off of work early. And when you're interviewing, it's hard because you need to make time away, but you only want to do that so much because you don't want to arouse any suspicion that you might be interviewing. So this was actually a pretty negative thing. So the first big lesson I learned is you gotta make sure that you're doing your research and you find out, is this a good place to work before you invest any time into interviewing? Now, the manager didn't just ask me one negative question. What am I gonna hate about you in 6 months? I'm like, I don't know, but I already know what I hate about you. He asked us several other questions that I found to be really negative, really difficult, unnecessarily challenging for an interview. I mean, an interview is also you getting to know someone, not just one person grilling the other until they leave. So the second thing that I learned is that when you go and you join a new company and you take a new job, it is just as important that you connect with the hiring manager that the position is a good position. There's a lot of things that need to make sense in order for you to leave one job and go to another, especially if you're already in a good job. It's got to be a good company. It's got to be a good role. Compensation, benefits need to be in line with what you're hoping for. But one of the most critical things is that you end up working for a great boss, if at all possible. Working for a terrible boss who wants to know what they're going to hate about you is going to make your life a living hell. And leaving a good job, even a good job that's a bit of a dead end for a job that might be horrendous, could be a terrible mistake for your career. So I was so focused on getting that next promotion, getting that next step, making more money, that I almost walked into a place that might have been an absolute unmitigated nightmare. Thankfully, I didn't. Now, when the hiring manager started asking me questions, so many of the questions were around the must-haves for this job and my experience. And what I realized was I didn't do enough preparation specifically around job alignment and job misalignment. And by that I mean, how am I qualified for this role and am I prepared to speak on those things? And the experience points I didn't have, how can I articulate my response in a way that builds confidence that I could do these things? The third thing I learned is you really need to drill in on the job description, and you need to do the vast majority of your preparation around why you'd be a good fit for this based on the requirements. And the requirements you don't meet, well, why should they trust that you'll be able to do those things in the job? The reality is most people, when they're looking to make a job, it's for a bigger or better job. And you won't be 100% qualified for every single job you interview for. You shouldn't. That would be a lateral move. There needs to be some growth and some stretch. But you also really need to be prepared to talk to why you're a good fit for the role. Those must-haves that you meet, you need to be specific on why you're a good fit, how you have those requirements met, the things you've done, and you need to be prepared to impress. And the things that you don't meet, well, you need to be able to talk about why that shouldn't be a concern to them, how you'd be willing to take those on, why you're well equipped to take on that additional responsibility, and why you think you would be successful. And you need to be able to articulate that in a convincing manner. Now, you can do all these things right, and you still might not get the job. Guess what? That's okay. Most people, though, when they don't get a job, they just move on with their life. That's the wrong thing to do. There's actually a strategy when you do not get the job that's going to help you get future jobs. I made a video about it right here. So I'm done with this video, but I'm telling you, you gotta go watch that one because that one's gold.